מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שלום עליכם מלאכי השורש מלאכי
Today you shouldn't have any prophetic vision in order to realize the direction humanity is taking through technical progress and what changes we will witness in the near future. Man is working on many developments in various fields in order to put his life and his future under absolute supervision and control, thus ensuring the realization of all his dreams and desires according to his own will. Beyond the search of a sense of security and psychophysical balance and self-fulfillment, one of the major aspirations of humanity is the extension and improvement of earthly life. Nowadays, the concept of science fiction does no longer make much sense. We have reached such a degree of progress that man is capable of carrying out all that he imagines and undertakes. In this study, I will try to bring together some thoughts and visions that I think are coming to fruition. What you will hear is not the result of the literary fantasy of insane utopians, but are indeed the reports and the results of scientific researches already reached, particularly by physicists and computer scientists. When we are talking about the installation of surveillance cameras in the streets and all other public places, it is difficult to imagine that effective controls could occur when this system needs countless observers posted behind their screens in order to be effective and avoid crime. Those who have already heard about the concept of quantum computing, that is officially still at the experimentation level today, may already have some idea of how this little problem can be solved. There may not even be any human presence behind the cameras to ensure absolutely effective surveillance over the entire face of the world. This new generation of computers differs from all familiar ones in that information is no longer stored in the form of bits on the basis of the combination of numbers 0 and 1, but in the form of qubits, when the 0 and the 1 combine and overlap. In simple words, the difference is that a single quantum computer will be able of performing an incredibly greater number of computations than all the conventional computers existing in the world put together. Some sources argue that it will be possible to construct supercomputers that can handle more information at the same time than there are atoms in the whole universe. If only 1/1,000,000th of this prediction was realized, total control of humanity would become a child's play. The different methods of biometric identifications, such as facial recognition and many others, may suggest that virtually no human intervention in the control process will really be needed. When other, even more effective identification methods will emerge, for example, by the means of electronic chips grafted under the skin, the use of surveillance cameras will be simply useless, since mankind will become controllable from within his body and soul. It will no longer be really interesting to spy him from the outside. Here, we are not talking about urban or national transportation networks, such as British Railways or American Airlines, but rather the road network controlled by robotics, where cars will no longer have steering wheels built in. We will stop being the drivers of our own vehicles, because the well-known GPS system will also supervise the movements of our cars. In order to ensure efficient circulation in such a complex network, the quantum computer will also be the basic tool. An absolutely perfect circulation system will be developed, governed by satellite and quantum calculations, so that no user breaks the rules of the highway code. Thus, we can go from one point to another without any risk of accident, even in the case of pedestrians, since they too will have their own chips inside of them that will make them visible to the eyes of the system to also ensure them a perfect security. Road signs will be a bad memory. No chance either that a child pops up and throws himself in front of a moving car, as the chip installed under his skin will send information to the computer brain of the vehicle operating the brake system in time in order to avoid any collision. But it is possible that the child himself will never jump on the road because the microchip will send a cerebral impulse forcing him to stay on the sidewalk. A fundamental question when we talk about total control is the hold on the human brain. Although having influence on brains implies its perfect knowledge, it is hard to believe what can be seen on the internet regarding the advanced experimental level in the field. The results of the experiments made public are revealing a great mastery of the key organ of the human body. We already know exactly how to influence the thinking, the acts, and even the physical condition of people by acting on their brains. The goal of transhumanists is no longer a secret. They want to increase the brain capacity of people by connecting their brains to computers and the internet. In addition to the advantage of having an extensive and profound knowledge of all things, without having to study anything, it will be possible to manipulate the thoughts of the individuals. In addition, we can find the discoveries of breakthroughs in the field of genetic manipulation that allows humans to increase their physical potential by grafting genes or DNA of animals in order to get some characteristics and abilities that only the animals had until now. For example, sight and hearing of dogs, muscular power of bears, etc. Man as we know him, and as he was conceived by the Creator, will be substituted by a new humanoid species, a superhuman, reworked by the human himself. The control of the world population will no longer occur from the outside, but from the inside, from within the soul itself. The solution to all the problems lies in this. The regime will not only be able to observe absolutely everything that goes on in people's minds, but will also be able to intervene to change the course of things. Indeed, if a bad or even criminal thought arises in the brain of an individual, the information will instantly appear in the central computer system that will simply send back an impulse in the given brain to block and correct the deviant thought and bring back the ideas of the person in the order of laws defined and established by the central rule. If we push the reasoning a little further, we can realize that even diseases can be cured, even before they show up. There will be no more psychical illness, no more mental illnesses, no more depressed people, no more bitterness pushing men to consume excessive quantities of alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, coffee, or chocolate. All these will be avoided by electronic waves of bioresonance. The harm will be nipped in this bud we call the human brain. Men subjected to the system will be assured of maintaining this psychic balance so coveted for thousands of years. A false harmony will settle in the human relations, where no violence nor any other divergence of ideas will have any place. Different people, different states, religions, races will cease all form of rivalry, and not only because the idolatry of ideologies such as ecumenism or globalization, but also because of scientific progress. There are theories that scientists will one day be able to download to a computer all the data contained in people's brain in order to make them live beyond their corporal longevity. Thus, they claim, the human soul will be able to survive its body and will no longer follow it in death. The human soul, once downloaded, would be able to think, to reason and communicate with the outside world after the disappearance of its bodily envelope. This is one of the scientific theories of eternal life that would take place in a virtual world and that is advanced by quite serious and renowned physicists. For my part, I am convinced that this ridiculous theory, among other things, will be impossible because the Creator will never let man go so far as to succeed in safeguarding his own mind independently of his body. On the other hand, knowing human nature, I cannot imagine that man would content himself in being mindly downloaded to a machine, giving up all the pleasures that the body can offer him. Certainly not. Man will not be content with an eternal life that is virtual and devoid of carnal pleasures. The body has always been considered by man as the most precious of treasures. Vice-thirsty humanity will never agree to continue living by giving up on feasts, drinking, sex, money and power. The ultimate covetousness of man is precisely to reach eternal life in their carnal body, while preserving good health and relative youth, to enjoy the pleasures of the senses. How could man give up all this, while the foundation of human nature has always been the flesh itself? After having eaten from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, human knowledge is now approaching its culminating point. What once began in the lost Garden of Eden is getting fulfilled before our eyes. History has reached the limit of the ultimate human knowledge, symbolized by the famous number 666. However, there was another tree whose fruit was also forbidden. The tree of life remained untouched because the Lord expelled Adam and Eve before they could reach it. Genesis chapter 3:24. Man cannot consume from the fruit of the tree of life because Elohim has blocked his way. The man on his side is clever enough to find an alternative and reproduce the effect that the second untouchable fruit would have had. To do this, he uses all the knowledge gained during the consumption of the first fruit and naturally benefits from the help of the devil. The counterfeit of this second fruit is almost ready, and in my opinion, it is already active, although for the moment it has not yet been revealed to the general public. There are methods, such as bioresonance, capable of locating and correcting diseased or defective cells. In fact, the atoms of defective cells vibrate differently than those of the healthy ones. Man has been aware of this physical law since the development of the theory of strings within quantum physics. It is thus possible to detect them by means of sensors and rectify them with counterwaves emissions, able of restoring the original vibrations. So we can not only cure ill cells, but we can also slow down, even stop, or perhaps even reverse the aging process of cells. Bioresonance is not yet accepted by the medical profession as a scientific method. I do not say either that this is the absolute weapon against death. I quote it as an example to illustrate that the descendants of Adam will use their scientific knowledge to recover what they have lost at the beginning. The goal of medicine is to cure diseases and to increase life expectancy. How could one believe that it would stop in such a good way? Those who will have money or privileges to pay for such a cure will profit from a body immune to aging and diseases. If, in addition, the outside world provides protection, as we have explained before, in theory, some people will really have every chance to experience eternal life on earth. Of course, they will not benefit indefinitely, although conditions have been reached. For it is at this moment that the Lord will intervene to say, enough. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. In addition to the political dimension of this prophecy, when governments will unite to make peace under the control of our universal leader, we must also consider this much more individual dimension, since most of the men are mainly concerned with their own person as well as with the peace and security which concerns them intimately. Some may wonder why so many people will submit to the power of the Antichrist. Are we going to force them under the rule of terror and totalitarianism, like Orwell wrote? A kind of dictatorial Antichrist will yell at them, proposing either the microchip or the electric chair? Absolutely not. It will not terrorize and threaten anyone, at least not in this form. History has repeatedly shown that lasting power cannot be set by force. The people always end up revolting. The enemy has forged more and more subtle tools to win humanity. All this began in ancient Greece, in the cradle of democracy, and then continued by the French Revolution, to finally lead to this form of political power that has been in place since the end of World War II, and that we call globalization. Man is at the base equipped with a very effective human system, and besides the commandments of the Lord, which are engraved in the heart of every human being, man has the spark of life implanted in his soul that keeps him alive. He always struggles to preserve his freedom. Freedom in the positive and negative sense too. Man does not sell himself at any price. This is the reason why it is necessary to break him down so that he gives up his individual freedom. It is enough to generate constant and collective anxiety through the media. We keep talking about diseases, crimes of all kinds, terrorism, and we end up feeling concerned, even if it does not affect us directly. The seed of fear is installed through media in our heart and starts growing. To establish chaos, we generate terrorist attacks, wars, epidemics, famines, mass migration movements, in order to sow confusion between people, and most importantly, we talk about it as much as possible so that people are obsessed. The time is coming when crowds of people will rush headlong into any solution that can solve all these problems that are increasingly unbearable. They will submit body and soul to any ideology or political system, offering a way out of this global hell. This solution, or rather this savior, we are a number to know who he is. And he will unfortunately deceive many, even among the elected ones. I think, however, that the spread of terror and anguish would not be enough to convince the masses. Another sensitive point that is useful to target in humans is their deep egoism and hedonism. Indeed, the major motivation of mankind is its own physical and psychical well-being. Contemporary man only thinks of one thing: to have fun and consume. The question of selling their souls to the devil no longer arises, since they will enjoy all the benefits described above in the text. Look around you. You can see almost nothing but people completely absorbed by their mobile phones, on which they play, they watch movies, they buy products, then they plan their trips abroad and their rendezvous. The prototype of the tool of their loss is already in their hands. Nobody forced them to get it. On the contrary, they go so far as to spend huge sums to acquire it, despite being aware that they are already under a very strong control through their phones. All their movements, conversations, interests are recorded in a centralized database. Even unplugged, a phone is naturally a highly efficient listening device. People know that. It bothers them at first. Then they get used to it. And they finally end up demanding to be spied, to feel safe, because this is the only way to keep dangerous people under control too. They become more and more willing to give up their individual freedom if it helps to soothe their fears. They do it furthermore because the desire to have fun and to have everything at hand is stronger than anything. Because the concept of freedom is precisely mixed up with the feeling of well-being and satisfaction. It is obvious that the greater part of the world will sell itself without any regret to the least power assuring them their favorite little pastimes, as well as the deliverance from the dangers overwhelming them. There is no question about that. See Noam Chomsky's 10 mass manipulation techniques. Depending on the financial means of the user, the connection of the human brain to computers will allow him to download a given amount of information without having to open a book or enroll in any school. It is increasingly difficult to follow the flood of information beating down on us every day. A world in constant change needs people who can constantly train and retrain themselves in order to keep pace with progress. This task is, however, more and more complex, and even the most talented ones are beginning to get lost in this incredible maze. The solution is therefore knowledge implants. It will be enough to think of a subject, to see scrolling down all the information about it in our head in the form of codes that we can directly transpose in our own language. No need to go to Wikipedia or other online databases, because the brain will be directly connected to the network. It is hard to imagine. One thing is certain, life will not be easy for us. For it is precisely those who do not wear the seal of the Antichrist on the hand or the forehead who will be stigmatized by those who are wearing it. In view of all this technical progress, the question must be known. Where is the limit that we must not cross in any case? A few decades ago, our predecessors thought that the bank card was already the sign of the Antichrist. Why it was not yet the case? It is obvious that the bank card is a prefiguration of the famous evil seal that we will have to refuse, and without which it will not be possible to sell or buy. The boundary is where we will be proposed to implant a system in our body that is able to influence our thoughts and actions. It is at this precise point that we will have to say no. What you've just heard is unfortunately not the whimsical delirium of a paranoid and extravagant sectarian, but the story of a reality that is not to come, but which is already at hand. I do not intend to fan any Aurelian paranoia and write a pseudo-prophetic Christian text to make noise. We could still describe at length the appearance of the world at the end of times, but I prefer not to disgust the reader and myself even more, because this is not the most important, and we must absolutely avoid getting lost in the details. Whatever form the system takes, Satan's evil plan is to accomplish exactly what Christ promised to all who would offer their lives to him, which is the fulfillment of the commandments in the faithful's heart. But in the place of Christ and through technology, it is Satan who enters the hearts of people to offer them perfect peace and security for a time. In both cases, the price is exactly the same: the individual himself, body, soul, and spirit. Who do you sell your soul to? That's the question. We must acknowledge that our spirit can never belong to us, but we have the choice to put it back in the hands of Christ, or to let it remain under the other power. To whom did we entrust our mind and our person in general? In the hands of the Lord of this world, for an ephemeral welfare with death as outcome, or in the hands of Christ, for true eternal life?
מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שלום עליכם מלאכי השורש מלאכי